What is up, everyone? Welcome to the fifth episode of No One's a Critic, the best podcast on the internet by far. You don't need to listen to anything else but this show. But I'm joined here today by my co-host Mac. How you doing, Mac?
Not too bad. How about yourself?
Good, good, good. This has been a pretty busy week. It was April Fool's on Friday. It's Sunday when we're recording this, and I wasn't planning on doing anything for April Fool's Day. I hate those like joke videos that YouTubers do where it's like, I'm quitting YouTube, or it's just like a fake video. It's like 30 minutes of blank footage or whatever. I think that's annoying to the viewers. So I was like, I don't want to do any like April Fool's bullshit. But then last minute, like I think maybe Monday or Tuesday, I got the idea like I've always wanted to review the Sopranos video game, Road to Respect. It came out on the
Yeah, I
PlayStation
saw that
2.
one. That was tight.
Yeah, it's a god awful game from what I hear, but I didn't really have a way to play it. I don't know where my PlayStation is. It's in my parents' house somewhere.
Your PlayStation 2, right? Is it? That's what it was on? Yeah.
It's on PlayStation 2. I think PS3 has backwards capability because I don't even know if I have the PlayStation 2 anymore. But
Mhm.
even so, I wasn't going to go to my parents' house and get it. So I was like, why don't I review the story? Because that's kind of, what I do. And we're going to talk about reviews in general and what the point of them is here. But it was a lot of work because it's like 3 hours worth of footage. I got a long play from some YouTuber. I asked his permission. He said it was okay. And I just talked about the story and all the plot holes and bullshit with it, and it was a lot of work, but it was I think it was fun for everyone to check out the game.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that, and I was just like, it's just so funny because, like, the show is like a very mature drama. So the fact that someone was like, "Hey, we should make like a GTA clone out of it," or like not even a clone, like a really like crappy GTA esque video game about it. Um, It's just so weird, like, of all the subjects.
I think they are a little bit behind on the times because, or ahead of their time, because if like Telltale Games or something had gotten this, they could have made
Oh,
something kind of
shit.
interesting.
That'd be tight.
Yeah, and because they had the whole cast, like what video games rarely get the full cast with any adaptation, but
Mhm.
they had everyone there. It's just unfortunate that this was in a time where they gave like tie-in media to like shovelware studios, and they just made some shitty product to just put out there. To be fair to them, it looks from the behind the scenes documentary I saw that they went out of their way to like, you know, make the locations look authentic and to get the voice actors and all of that. But in terms of the writing, like, man, how awesome would this be if like Terry Winter wrote it or something? It would have been
Yeah.
so sick. But
Well,
it's still fun.
yeah, it's just, like, trying to, like, "Hey, how can we make, like, an action game out of The Sopranos?" And it's like, you really you can't because it's
You
not an
can't.
action show. It's like,
It
there's even very little even, like, compared to the whole show, violence is a somewhat small aspect of the show itself.
Oh yeah, I mean, if the game had just been like a bunch of cutscenes strung together with like button prompts to choose, like what dialogue you want to say or what action you want to take, people would love that. If it was a
Yeah,
good
Telltale, that'd be
story.
sick.
Yeah, but unfortunately, it's 3 hours of cutscenes strung together by another 3 hours of monotonous button mashing fights. But it's something to talk about, and that's always good for us reviewers. And to kind of go over to our main topic here, we're talking about the Oscars and talking about reviews in general. And so, do you want to maybe address the elephant in the room here?
Yeah, well, I actually, I saw the whole broadcast and people were talking about something that happened, between 2 other actors. I don't really recall what it was.
It has
It
nothing,
apparently it was a big splash and, like,
kind
everyone
of
was
something
talking about it.
obscure. Yeah.
Yeah, like, all these little niche references that we just don't keep up on. But no, in all seriousness, I think we kinda discussed it before we hopped on. If you're out there hoping that we'll kind of, like, spend a lot of time on it, I can assure you neither of us give an absolute fuck about the whole Chris Rock Will Smith thing. I think we both agree that, like, regardless of what you think of the joke or if it was out of line, you know, hot take, assaulting someone on live television isn't cool. And the fact that we're like still talking about this and it's a big thing, personally, I mean, maybe you feel different. I don't think you do. This is like the dumbest controversy in I've seen in a long time.
The only enjoyable thing to kind of come out of this is all the Sopranos memes, where people put like Chris Rock and Will Smith over Sopranos characters. So it's like Chris Rock saying, "I heard your wife got a 95-pound mole taken off her ass," and then he's like, "I want you to sanction a hit on Chris Rock." He's like, are you out of your fucking mind?"
Wow, I'm just breaking
Oh
balls.
yeah, yeah. Here, hold this, smash. So those are pretty funny, but
The
yeah,
memes
the
are pretty tight.
yeah, but other than that, I mean, it's just like embarrassing all around that this even happened, and some people were even suggesting that it could be like prearranged to generate controversy because the Oscar this is like the lowest viewership the Oscars ever got. Um, but I don't think that's the case. It looks from everything I've seen to be a real thing and a stupid thing and something unbecoming of like professional actors. This should not be how they interact with each
Or
other.
just adults, like, it's just ridiculous, but, um yeah, so, yeah, like, again, we're not gonna spend any time on that because like, that's just not worth our time, but I think we were kinda more interested in discussing just how much and really for, I would say, a lot of award show, but particularly the Oscars, um, the dwindling relevance of it when it comes to, like, fans of film. So, for example, like, the joke is, if you don't care about film at all, you don't care about the Oscars. If you care about film a little bit, you you kind of care about what the Oscars think. It's like, oh, you looked at the Oscars. If you really, really like film, you do not give a fuck what the like. It's not like the Oscars don't even register for you anymore. And it's interesting that even today, it still sort of has this it's treated as something. It's like, oh, the Oscars, oh, we should what nominate for Best Picture, when at least for the last, I mean, like for a long time, but particularly I think in the last 15 years, ever since the 2008 Dark Knight scandal, not really a scandal, but like that whole episode when they increased the Best Picture pool to 10 nominees, um, people have just completely lost any sort of air of authority or prestige the Oscars had. It's just been dwindling year after year after year.
Well, I think there's a number of reasons for that. I think one, a lot I think people feel, and this is coming from someone who has no interest in the Oscars and doesn't know a whole lot about it. I didn't actually watch the latest Oscars aside from, the thing that will not be mentioned. But um, as someone who only has only heard peripheral stuff about the Oscars, I think the reason why people are not interested is two reasons. One is oftentimes they don't select what people think are the best Oscar or best films. They select the things that they think are like the most appealing to them or the most appealing to like art critics who are out of touch with reality and like not in tune with what the public is really excited about and what they're really into. Um, which is okay. I mean, it has its place to have like, these highfalutin society people who are judging things on more than just like a mass commercial scale. Because if I think if the public got their way, a lot of times it's going to be like Avengers is going to win, the best picture, or whatever, which maybe deserves it, but I think they're trying to cultivate an image that the Oscars are like more artistic and sophisticated than just mass market appeal. But the other problem with the Oscars is a lot of people who are into like this stuff are aware of the fact that the Oscars is very very corrupt. Like there's a whole industry behind basically like buying Oscars. You don't literally buy it, but you bribe the people who get it. And it's not just the Oscars, by the way. It's the Emmys, it's the Golden Globes. The Golden Globes, especially from what I hear, because the Hollywood Foreign Press are the only ones who vote on those ones, and everyone knows who they are, so you can very easily bribe them, and you do it in like unofficial ways, like you give them like gifts and like you're like, hey, we want to show you the movie or whatever, and they get this like pampered experience, and whatever, and they get to meet the celebrities, and so it's this whole like rigged game, which is very disgusting and ungenuine to the art form, which is why I think people feel like these awards mean nothing.
hmm Um, to for both of those, the first one, absolutely, the Oscars have been really struggling with. They're trying to balance that sort of level of prestige they really want to have, but also they want to be popular with the general film going public. So obviously, like in the past and even today, still kind of the Oscars has always had a bias sort of towards a certain type of film. Costume dramas, very serious period pieces, things like sci-fi, action, comedy, horror. These are genres, despite regardless of quality, these are all genres that have been continuously looked down upon by the Academy.
Mhm.
And if like a horror film or sci-fi film does get nominated, it usually is either a rare case, either it doesn't really win that much, um, or it has to be significantly better than other films. This is why Dune winning so many Oscars this past ceremony was such a big deal, because this very highbrow sci-fi film getting so much recognition was excellent. But of course, it was almost all in technical
Yeah.
fields. Villeneuve wasn't even nominated for best director, which people were
Mhm.
like, "What the hell?" Um, so yeah, ever since 2008, when the big like levy breaking in terms of that was The Dark Knight not being nominated for best picture. People were like, "What the fuck? Oscar bias, yada yada yada." So the next year they raised the limit to 10 films. The problem was that we kind of have these two conflicting ideas, because the more accessible or like popular you try to make the ceremony, the less perceived prestige it has. And the Oscars have been trying to balance this over the last about 15 years to try and keep that level of prestige. And we talk about serious film while also trying to make it like, hey, we're gonna do a fan favorite movie, or like that's like the stupid thing this year with like the fan favorite moment, and the it was just so stupid. Um, but because they're trying to play both sides of the field, if you will, they end up not reaching anyone. And now it's just like this: what even is the Oscars? Is it a popularity contest? Is it a prestigious award show? It kind of has completely lost its identity.
I think you're right there with the loss of identity, because I think also, besides just the fact that this is an award show, which gets lost in the muddle of, A, we want to have like a really high viewership. And so we're going to basically have this big party, right, with all the celebrities, and it's exciting. We get to see them come in and all this stuff. And that was interesting in the past, right, to be like, oh my God, look at the celebrity here. But in the modern age, like, a lot of hype around celebrities has died, I think, for a number of reasons. One, because they're much more accessible with the internet and stuff. Like, I can always see what what X actor is up to. They tweet, they on Instagram, they're on whatever. So it's not really like, oh my God, I see him at the red carpet, this is so exciting. And so that aspect has kind of gotten lost a little bit. A lot of celebrities have been embroiled with controversy, right? We've seen them do some pretty bad stuff that makes us even question like the whole idea of like celebrity worship. And I know we both are not into that at all, but I think a lot of people in the past have really been into it. They're like, oh my God, these people are so great. I love them. They're like gods, basically, that are coming down from Olympus, and I get to watch them tonight. But that mentality, I think, has been slowly kind of dying, and even regular people too. Is just that whole aspect is not as appealing anymore. And so the whole business side of the Oscars, because if the Oscars just wanted to be this like really elite award, right, they could just have like a publication, right, and be like, hey, here's the top 10 movies we picked. We don't care, what your opinion is, but it's just we're gonna post it online or whatever. But no, they want to have this big event. They want to have viewership. They want to make money off of it. They want to sell advertisements, whatever. And so it's that disconnect between, we got to appeal to everyone to get viewership, versus we want to be this hoity-toity elite, bullshit.
Yeah, it's just and like that's not even to say like their track record even before this was horrible, particularly when it comes to not just trying to be popular, but particularly when it comes to Oscar bias. They shut out films that are deserving, but they aren't the right genre. Their track record for foreign films is horrendous. Just a couple years ago, or maybe it was last year, the film Minari, starring Stephen Yeun, it was a very good film about Korean immigrants coming to the U.S. It was an American film shot in America, like directed by an American. Like everything about it was American. It was made here, but because the principal language spoken in the film was Korean, it was filed under like best foreign film or something. Like it was something completely stupid. Um, but kind of bring it back to when we're talking about like the Oscars being corrupt. Now, obviously, like the Oscars themselves have always been political. Like, there's no way to separate it. There's always been campaigns, even back in the 40s with Citizen Kane. You know, William Randolph Hearst. There was a huge campaign against the film. It's always been present. However, the real uh, the real sort of like tipping point was there's a YouTuber by the name of Be Kind Rewind. She's excellent. She does um, all of her videos are about the Best Actress Oscar nominations and like the controversies and whatnot. She has a video in regard to the 1999 or 8 Oscars when Shakespeare in Love beats Saving Private Ryan for Best Picture, which is considered one of the biggest snubs of all time. And she goes in depth how, again, like how you mentioned, even before that, there was always schmoozing. There was always like, hey, nudge, nudge, you're gonna get my film, like I'll
Yeah.
take you out to dinner. But it really was that Oscars with Harvey Weinstein and his campaigning for that film when people realized, oh, you, you can just buy the Oscars, can't you?
Mm.
Like before, it was kind of like it's part of it, but you still have to make like a good film or like a
Yeah.
film that's deserving. Not to say Shakespeare in Love is a bad film, but this was like a a, a watershed moment of showing, hey, enough money. If you just throw enough money at the Oscar members and it, you know, and the public, the right press, the right publications, you can kind of make anything possible. And then that's when the Oscars started to tip into this the studios all of a sudden just started to like, yeah, let's just follow that model and just start, schmoozing the Oscar voters even more so than they already were.
And I mean, yeah, I mean, I've seen Shakespeare in Love. I mean, it's a decent movie, but it's not. I mean, maybe it's better than Saving Private Ryan to a certain opinion because there's no like objectivity with art, but you have to be consistent with your vote, right? If you're gonna be like we're judging art, right? You have to be consistent. Like otherwise, there's no point to the awards, right? You have to make people understand what you're judging the criteria on. That's what you and me both do as reviewers, right? Our opinion is subjective, but we're presenting evidence for it. We're showing why we think it is the way it is. And if you're not doing that, then the award's completely meaningless. And I think that's, again, why people are so disinterested in this because it either feels political, whether it is or it isn't, right? It feels like and political not just in terms of like our American politics, but political in terms of studios negotiating for certain outcomes or doing whatever. It just feels like phony and arranged. And I think that's one of the themes we've been kind of harking on this whole time with all of our episodes is that like if it's not coming from a genuine place, it feels fake and it pisses people off. And that's, I think, again, a general trend of why people don't give a shit about this whole awards ceremony anymore.
Exactly. And to your point, well, it's fine. I made a video on my issue to Saving Private Ryan. Ironically, though, while I would say it is a better film than Shakespeare in Love, and Shakespeare in Love is a good film, I'm not denying that. However, what's ironic about it is that Saving Private Ryan is like the definition of an Oscar baity film. It's a period piece. It's very like sweeping emotions. It had Tom Hanks in the lead role, Steven Spielberg. It was like so the fact that it got beat out by like it's Shakespeare in Love still was a period piece, of course, but like this smaller independent feature,
Mm-hmm.
that's what made it so like what the f. Um, Another issue is something we saw prop up in the last 10 years or so when it comes to, I mean, discussion of diversity at the Oscars has always been a thing, but particularly in the last 10 years with campaigns like Oscars So White, talking about diversity at the Oscars, and this is a mistake and obviously like there are a lot of people who like on both sides of the aisle who I'm sure we both think are idiots. Like their opinions are so lacking in nuance as to whatever or knowledge as to whatever they're talking about, you can't even listen to them. But the main issue that the Oscars made was that in response to the charges of lack of diversity, instead of saying, hey, this is more of a studio issue. If these studios are not funding, you know, independent projects for POC or female creators, if and then even beyond that, if they aren't properly campaigning for them, one of the big controversies in 2015 was that Ava DuVernay's Selma was not nominated for, I think, a couple of the big awards before the Oscars. Well, it turns out that the studio didn't send screeners to these award ceremonies for whatever reason, whether it's just lack of, whether indifference or lack of care, I don't know. But instead of saying, hey, studios, you need to be better when it comes to selecting directors, selecting talent, which projects you're funding and which projects you like prop up when it comes Oscar time, their mentality was, hey, if we add more diverse members to the Academy, then they'll automatically nominate more diverse films, which is, even funny enough, Jada Pinkett Smith, of all people, was the one who kind of called out the Academy president for it, saying, hey, idiot, like this idea that black people are just going to nominate black films is stupid. We're going to nominate the best films.
Mhm.
But if you don't prop up the best films, or if you don't give films a chance as you do other films, then we'll always have this problem with diversity. But now the Oscars is just, again, they're floundering. They don't know what to do. They're constantly paranoid about, oh, are there enough POC actors nominated? And it just, they constantly keep shooting themselves in the foot.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this a lot. The whole idea of like, you know, kind of forced diversity. I definitely think the Oscars have had like a bias against, you know, colored actresses and actors for a long time. I think I talked about this. I did a review of Gone for the Wind, and Hattie McDaniel was the first you know, black woman to win an Oscar, and the next one to win, and this was in, you know, 1939, 1940, somewhere around there. And the next one to win an Oscar wasn't until I think the 80s with Whoopi Goldberg.
Or I think, Sidney Poitier, I think, won Best Actor in the
Oh, I talk about
'60s.
female
Oh,
actresses.
sorry, female.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yeah.
but I mean, again, the whole thing of like it was a long, long stretch where they had
Hmm.
women, and of course there were great women in roles, you know, throughout that whole time. So I definitely think that there was a bias there. But you're right, the way that they address it again comes off to people like it makes them feel like, oh, when they win an award, this isn't because they deserved it. It was because the Oscars is trying to send a message for something, and it just doesn't come off like genuine. I think there are fucking idiots, right, who are like, anytime a colored, you know, person wins an award, they're like, oh, you didn't deserve it, whatever. But that those are idiots. But a lot of people feel like because of the way that, you know, these certain groups act, right, it comes off as forced, and that pisses a lot of people off, and they're like, oh, okay, these awards mean nothing too because all you're trying to do is pander to, you know, a certain demographic or a certain culture or whatever, and these awards have no like objective meaning when they absolutely do, and they should, but they just need to come from a place of genuine, you know, respect for the art craft, and their performances in order to, you know, make people realize that they do truly deserve these awards.
Yeah, it's again, it's like they keep, it's like you're shooting yourself in the foot. You can't win either way. Like in 2012, when 12 Years a Slave won Best Picture, um, deservingly so. It was an absolutely phenomenal film. But of course, there were people who were like, "Oh, of course, you gave the slave film Best Picture because if we didn't vote for it, we'd be racist." So it kind of, but in that case, those people saying that are like, well, you're stupid. Like this was like one of the most acclaimed films of the year. It was incredibly good. It was incredibly high quality. It deserved the awards. Your implication that it only won because it was, you know, for like, because we don't want to seem racist, is demeaning to the artists. On the other hand, I think it was in 2016. It was the year after Oscar So White. The next year, a number of films were nominated, particularly Moonlight, which went on to win Best Picture, um, Hidden Figures, and Fences with Denzel Washington and Viola Davis. Now, a lot of people, when this happened, were saying, "Oh, the Oscars finally got it right. See, they nominated these films because of all our complaining last year." Or other people would say, oh, well, these films only got nominated because, they're black films and the Oscars are trying to make up for last year. Of all people, Denzel Washington came out and said, and again, this is like when you have people who have no idea anything about film talking and running their mouths off. Denzel Washington said, hey, idiots, you understand that these films are in production for a long time, right? It's not as if they made it sound as if like, oh, the only reason these films were made and got nominated is because the Oscars were trying to make up for last year. Like these films were in production during the time the Oscar so white thing was going on, even before that. There's a great interview with Denzel Washington where he basically says, like, I'm for diversity, but I don't like this idea that the only reason Fences, which was which was based on an August Wilson play, one of the greatest playwrights of all time, directed and starring Denzel Washington and Viola Davis, the idea that anyone would say, well, this film must have only got nominated because they're trying to improve diversity, as opposed to the incredible talent and material they were working with, is just very demeaning. It's very degrading. It's just they're saying you're squashing the quality of the work by implying, oh, it only is being acclaimed for diversity reasons.
You know what's funny though? You bring up Denzel Washington. The the thing I was watching about the Oscars that explained like the process of buying them and bribing people and stuff like that. It was an Adam ruins everything episode, which I know are not people have problems with that show. Like some things they say are not accurate, but
Yeah.
the clip he showed in that thing was Denzel Washington joking like in front of everyone at the awards ceremony about how he bribed to get the award. Like they're like, they had us meet with all these people and pose with the magazine, and they said, you do this, you're going to win the award. And he's like, and look, we won the award. Um, so it absolutely does happen that like there's outside influences here. Even Denzel was joking about that and how corrupt the system is. Again, not to say that these movies that win an award or whatever don't deserve it, because I think most of them are still good movies regardless. Like I don't think they would ever put up an intentionally horrible movie just for the sake of like public appearance or anything like that. They're choosing from a pool of pretty good movies all around, right? I think most of them that get nominated are at least decent. They're not bad movies. But the process of how they decided is very much influenced by money, by politics, by studio involvement, by personal bias, all this kind of stuff right there. Which, I mean, I guess gets us into the question of: is there such thing as objective review? Right? Is there no matter what we do, there's no objective way really to judge these films or anything like that. It all comes down to our personal subjective opinion. You might really like a film and think it's the most groundbreaking thing ever, but to someone else they might not care and they might think of something else is better. So how do we balance out competing interests, competing views to create something that feels like genuine and fair to everyone?
Yeah, this was I actually had discussed this on another video of mine. I forget what it was, but it was talking about video games and how I don't mean to imply, or like we're talking about more like not necessarily like on like like content creators like you and I, but more like reviewers who write for publications, like bigger publications. They have and again, I don't mean to like disparage them. However, I understand that someone who writes for like a big publication, whether they're reviewing a film or a video game, they have a lot more pressure on them, a lot more eyes on them than say you or me.
Oh
So
yeah.
the example was like The Last of Us Part Two. That was a film that was a video game when it came out, was very controversial. There was a lot of opinions, a lot of extreme opinions on both sides. People are not, you either an SJW pussy or you were an alt right troll if you didn't like it, or anti trans or whatever. Um, and so I can imagine for a writer writing for like a big publication, and again, I'm not disparaging them. I'm talking about the pressure that's around them, like their bosses who are probably like really like wary about like public perception. Like, hey, if you give us a bad review, it might come off bad or yada yada yada. Um, that's a whole different world. as opposed to like you or me, we're content creators, we're really in control of our own that. So, and obviously we have to be like, I was
Yeah.
very careful in my review of like, hey, like I'm not one of those like, if you don't like the game because there's trans characters, like go fuck yourself. But I'm able to have a bit more freedom in that sense.
Yeah.
However, or it's like, yeah, when it comes to the Oscars, particularly because it's been very clear that they seem very conscious about diversity, ratings, popularity. To your point, at what point is it really about the quality of the film?
Yeah, it's uh, that thing you brought up about video game reviewers is very true. I saw, I think Video Game Donkey did a video talking about, a lot of these reviewers have connections to the studios. They get the games early, they get interviews with developers, and it's not that there's like a legitimate like give us a good review, we're going to cut you off kind of situation. It's just that there's a pressure there to be like, go a little bit easier on the game than you normally would, because you don't want to ruin your relationship with the studio, because the next game that comes out, you want to get early access, you want to get your review out there first so you get more views. There's a whole economics behind any kind of review that you do. You also get the game for free, which colors your opinion as well, because if a game sucks but you got it for free, you're like, I don't really care that much. But if you spent $60 to $80 on the game and it sucked, that's why people get so pissed off at bad games.
That's a good
Um,
point.
and I think the economics of any kind of review are there. We talked about it for the Oscars, right? They want to have their big awards ceremony. It's true, I think, for content creators like you and me too, but just in like a different way. We're not worried about our boss coming down on us for doing something wrong, but we are worried about, like, at least on some level, you know, is this review going to piss everyone off and they're going to stop watching me? Is it going to piss everyone off in a good way and they're going to share my review with everyone else? And we talked about having extreme opinions before it gets you more views and stuff like that. And so that colors like content creators and their reviews as well. It's why you'll see so many videos being like, Star Wars is the worst fucking thing of all time, right? And really, it's like, who gives a shit? It's just kind of a crappy movie, but I got to have that extreme reaction in order to get views. And I don't want to say that anyone who's doing that online is not being genuine, because there are some people who are super passionate about that. But there's also a lot of people, just acting a certain way in order to get views, and that makes that review less subjective as well, because you're doing something to get more views, to be more popular or whatever like that. And I think it does raise a certain question of like, what is the difference between like what we do, what the Oscars do? What's the point of kind of reviewing anything in general? I'm interested to hear your take, because we're both like content reviewers in general. That's our main thing. We're talking about story, we're talking about shows, movies. What is the point of really listening to us bullshit about, what we think about a movie or in general?
Well, I think to your previous point about sort of like, yeah, so the main key is the fact that we're not saying that like some people are biased and other people aren't. We're all biased to a certain extent due to a number of factors. However, we have to recognize that a content creator with like a few thousand subs doesn't have the same amount of pressure on them as a film like the Oscars as a whole. They don't have as
Yeah.
many eyes on them, and so that person with a few thousand subs, on average, will have a bit more. They'll have a bit more freedom. As like, and again, this is just human nature. We're always influenced by outside factors, and trying to recognize them is important. Again, we're not saying that like Oscar voters are all like just corrupt. I mean, like plenty of them are. Like, there's plenty of reports of them like not watching the films and just voting for films for political reasons. But yeah, just to make that distinction. Um, well, it's interesting that you bring that up because I'm someone who, as much as like when I was a kid, I used to love film. Well, I mean, I do still do, but I used to like the Oscars. Like, yeah, the Oscars, cool, or like who won this award or who won Best Picture. Um, However, as I've gotten older, I've sort of gotten. I really don't, and this kind of is true on my with my content, and I think it's the same as you. I actually don't rank anything ever. I really don't like that because kind of going back to like the idea of objectivity uh is is The Godfather better than White Chicks? Yes, I would say yes. Most people would say that. um is let me see. Is The Shining better than Blade Runner? I I don't. What are we even talking about? Like, what are we even? One's a sci-fi film, one's a horror film. It's weird to me when I see stuff like that, like the best films of the '70s, and obviously, like, everything is, you know subjective. Like, and even some of these lists they're saying are subjective opinion. But like, what are you even ranking them by? Like, is The Godfather better than Citizen Kane? There's a certain threshold for films where it's like, if you put five classic films next to each other of different genres, and you're like, okay, rank them. It's like,
Yeah.
how do you even do it? And B, what's even the point of doing so?
Yeah, I really don't like rankings of like numerical rankings of artwork because you're right. I've always thought that there is no way to compare films of different genres. There's no way to compare films even of the same genre, right? Like, there's not like this movie is 10% better than this one, right? That's no, that's just bullshit. It's all kind of like subjective opinion, and you could have an idea that like, yeah, White Chicks is worse than Godfather, but that's also just your opinion, right? There's no objectivity, even if everyone agrees with that, right? There's no like, this isn't science. There's nothing that we could point out like story structure flaws, and I think that's the kind of content you and me do, which is that like films generally speaking follow a certain archetype. There's certain inherent paradigms of storytelling, and when you go against that or it contradicts other stuff in your film, that is a bad film experience for the viewer, and we're talking about that, and in that sense we're a little bit more objective. But ultimately it all comes down to opinion. There's, if you like White Chicks more than Godfather, I mean, all power to you. That's your choice, and I can't say anything about that. But I think that one of the things that we provide as content creators is one, that objectivity, quote unquote. I mean, it's not objective, it's subjective to us, but I'm being objective in terms of my own opinion, right? I'm being consistent with my reviews. I'm being consistent with what I'm criticizing. I'm not just being like, oh, Star Wars is bad because it pissed off whatever my sensibilities. I'm showing the story structure reasons why it's not good or something like that. But we have that consistency, and it's tied to our own individual personalities. I think people like reviewers in terms of that, is that like, oh, I get to know you, Mac, as a content creator. I get to know your opinion, and I feel like it's consistent enough where I can understand you and understand why you're making these decisions, and I agree with you most of the time, or disagree with you in a way that I still want to follow you. And that's why I continue to watch your channel. Versus like the Oscars, I don't know who's voting for these people. I don't know who they are, what decisions they're making, and so there's nothing here relatable to me because it's all just up in the air.
Hmm. Yeah, I think, again, I'm the same as you. I don't really find a value in saying, "Hey, is this film better than this film?" Um, there are times when I've done that. Like recently, I made a video comparing World's Greatest Dad and Dear Evan Hansen. However, the reason I did that is because the film's plots were similar enough that I was able to compare and contrast them. But even then, I didn't really say, like, World's Greatest Dad's at 8.7 out of 10 and Dear Evan Hansen's a 5 point. Like, I don't even know how to gauge it. Like, to me, it's like when it's kind of as like weird comparison. It's like when I see, like, if I see like a cute girl or something, and someone's like, "Oh, so what would you rank her out of 10?" I'm like, "What? I don't what? Like, what are we basing this on? Like, what criteria are you using?" It's like, and like half all that shit's like arbitrary anyway when
Yeah.
guys try to do that. Um, I guess like my viewpoint is kind of the same as yours. I think when we're when I'm critiquing a film, I'm not necessarily critiquing it based on some set of like arbitrary storytelling rules. Maybe sometimes, but it's mostly about going off of the internal rules the film sets for itself. So, for example, if I'm reviewing a David Lynch film and a bunch of nonsensical stuff happens, I, that's not really a critique because
Yeah.
it's a David Lynch film, and the rules of the film have established things aren't going to make sense. It's a
Yeah.
fever dream or what have you. Whereas if I'm watching Inception, which is a film that sets very hard rules, and then later on the film does not follow those rules, that is something you could point to and say, "Hey." But that isn't to say that does that mean that Mulholland Drive is better than Inception? because Inception is not internally consistent. Um, Maybe, but then again, there are plenty of films that are internally consistent that are absolute shit, and then there are films that are not that are not internally consistent that are good films
Yeah.
despite their flaws. So again, it gets back to this like I guess for me is like whenever I try to make a piece, I either want the audience to like think about something, to consider something, a different perspective, or when it comes to sort of story structure analysis, what can we learn from either the faults or successes of this film? What can you learn by analyzing this film, the flaws or the shortcomings of this film, so you can apply that same lens to your own writing? Um, I don't see a I don't see what the value is in saying, "Hey, this Star Wars movie." If I say the Star Wars movie is just bad, and I don't like give any reasons why, that doesn't give you value. Or if I say, "Hey, Blade Runner is a better sci-fi film than Alien," I don't know
Yeah.
what is the value that I'm getting from this.
The only other thing there is if the review is entertaining in and of itself, and that's a whole other can of worms here, which is that like review as content as a genre, right? um I I sometimes get negative comments being like, what's the point of watching this? What's the point of you're just, telling me stuff I already know? And I'm like, yeah, sure, maybe you already know this, but other people don't. But even if you do, I'm generally speaking trying to make the review entertaining enough on its own. I'm like throwing in jokes, I'm throwing in like I'm editing it in such a way that it's like visually engaging to watch, or at least I hope it is. I don't always succeed, but that's my intention. And you have guys like Video Game Donkey, who I brought up before, who he does not give like really. Sometimes he gives objective reviews on games, but a lot of times he's just talking shit, making jokes, making non sequiturs. But it's funny. You're not meant to take it really seriously. It's just humorous and it's enjoyable to watch in and of itself.
You're looking to them as more of like a personality than actual like a review.
Exactly, and that gets the whole thing of like, are you interested in the content in that case, or are you interested in the person making the content? Both of those are completely valid. There's people who it's like it's all about the content, their personality fades completely away. There's people who it's like, oh no, it's just about me, and like I'm doing all this stuff, and you like that person, so you want to watch them more. And there's people who are kind of more in the middle, which I think you and me both are a little bit more of that. Like we try to be as objective as we can, but our personality is also a part of it, our values, what we like and don't like. I mean, otherwise why would people be watching this podcast? It's about you and me just interacting. So there's no right or wrong way to do that, but I think that's what kind of goes through our mind when we're making this type of content. It's not just about giving the review or whatever, but it's also about creating an experience for the viewer that they hopefully enjoy and want to keep watching other stuff that we do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, like at least for me, like I think we've talked about this. I always try to, whenever I'm approaching a subject, like there are sometimes when I'll do funny videos, but I always try to look at a subject from an angle that hasn't been explored,
Yeah.
or discuss a film that I don't think has been talked about enough. Um, like a lot of people, like for example, when the Cowboy Bebop Netflix thing came out, a lot of people asked me like, "Hey, are you going to make a review on it?" And I'm like just to add along with like the 15 other reviews of other
Yeah.
YouTubers who just say it's crap. No. If I watch it and I see something that like
Yeah.
that hasn't been discussed and like can actually like we can get value, like hey, why did this fail?
Yeah.
That's one thing. But I have no interest in just making even if it's like a really funny, entertaining video,
Yeah.
I have no interest in making the video just saying this thing sucks. Or even if I did see the value in it, there's other people doing it already.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I agree with that, except for if I'm like really passionate. Like if it grabs me in
yeah,
such a way that it's like I've made videos that other people I think have covered too before. But I try to do it one in like a different way visually, or just arrange it in a different way, so it's just like a more cohesive experience. But also it's just something like, oh, I'm really into this. I want to talk about it, even if someone else has talked about it, or even if people are not really interested in this topic, right? I'm just super into it and I want to share with people. And that's where it comes back to like again more like the personality aspect of it, which is there's some of my reviewers who they only care about The Sopranos, right? They only want to watch The Sopranos. They don't want to hear about The Sopranos, so they don't care about anything else I do. There's other people who are like, oh, I liked his review of The Sopranos, so I'm interested in hearing his opinion on other stuff, whether he streams, whether he does, game reviews like this, whatever, and it's totally fine whichever way you feel about us as content creators, but um, that's what you're getting with some of those other videos is just like, hey, here's a little part of me that I want to share with the world. I don't want to go too far. I think we're both like not super into sharing like all of our personal lives with the internet, but I do occasionally like to just give a different take and give a different perspective than you normally get to see from me.
Yeah, yeah, like to your point about like passionate, like that's why I made my Last of Us 2 video. I mean, like there are plenty of people who said
Yeah.
their shit about Last of Us 2, but because it was a very passionate video game for me, I was, I needed to make it. Same thing with our reviews on Many Scenes of Newark.
Yeah.
At least before mine released, there were plenty of people who were speaking about the film, but for the most part, like echoing the sentiments that we made, in regard to like the meshing of, the Dickie plot and the Harold plot. But because we're passionate about it, we're like, well, we need to talk about this because this is something that um, that we care about and we're passionate about. But when it comes to other things that like I'm kind of indifferent, like there's the new Morbius film with Jared Leto is coming out, or it's already out, and it's like apparently the reviews are terrible. Could we make videos like just like crapping on it and get a decent view count? Probably. But what would be the purpose of that in
Mhm.
terms of beyond just
Yeah.
trying to get views?
Now, maybe if you were a super Morbius fan and you're like, "Oh, I want to talk because it's important to me," but otherwise, I'm okay talking about certain stuff that I'm just have a peripheral interest in, but I don't want to like invest the time in like a huge video, like editing everything, or writing a script, all of that. I would talk about it more in something like this, right? Where it's like, yeah, we could talk on the podcast, but I went and saw that Morbius movie. It was kind of shitty for XYZ reason, but I don't care enough to like make this long kind of content about it.
Hmm.
And I think people sometimes want to hear your thoughts on like little stuff like that. So that's why I stream. I know you stream too. So we can interact with the audience and just talk about stuff that I'm never going to put in like a full video. But again, that's forming that relationship with the audience there, that like because they know you, because they know your opinion, they're interested in your thought. Because no one wants to hear random people's thoughts about random stuff. They want to hear your thoughts because they enjoyed the stuff you've done in the past, all your videos and all your topics you've done. And so they're interested in like, oh, he hasn't talked about this, but I'd be interested to see his take on it because he always gives interesting takes, he always gives interesting opinions. And yeah, like I said, I feel like I'm harping on the same point, but it's forming that relationship with the viewer and making them understand your thought process and why you critique things the way you do, because if they agree with that, then they'll understand your perspective on other things like that.
Hmm. And yeah, I think it kind of goes back to like you were mentioning about like why do people watch certain content creators or what have you, um, and it's sort of, and sometimes you don't really have control over why your audience gravitates toward you. It's like, so for example, if I make content or videos, are people watching me because I'm funny or because I'm a personality? Like, I mean, I hope like that's cool, I guess. Um, are people only watching me because my opinions are line up with theirs? Like if I say, hey, uh, The Last of Us 2 isn't good, are you watching it because you actually like my perspective on it, or do you just want to like jerk off to like, yeah, Last of Us 2 sucks? Ideally, what I would like, I think what we would both like, and that's sort of like the content creator's dream, is like you said, hey, I watched this person because they always have an interesting perspective on their approach to storytelling, analysis, structure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's sort of like the sort of audience I want to sort of like congregate. Um, because like, yeah, I don't, and I'm sure they're the same way. You don't want audience who only watches you because they want you to say what they want you to say.
Yeah.
And a lot of creators, I do think, fall into that trap of that's kind of like going back to like the whole Star Wars example. Do all these creators really feel this negatively about Star Wars? Maybe, or is it? Are they kind of playing it up because hey, my audience really likes the really like vitriolic, like yeah, fuck Kathleen Kennedy and all this stuff. Um,
And you can
yeah,
never completely control that, right? I mean,
yeah.
even like directors and TV show creators struggle with that. Like, I think David Chase in particular, like on The Sopranos, has this whole like thing of people who are just like into like the whole gabagool aspect of the show, right? It's like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, more of this, more of that. Whereas he was like, the mafia stuff was part of it, but it was more about like telling about family and life in America and all these like complex themes. And for the rest of his life, he's got to hear people be like, gabagool over here, which is just like, it's part of it, but it's just one aspect. And, you can never control why people like you or why people want to watch you. Um, I'm grateful either way. If you are only interested in me for that reason, like, I mean, I still get the view or whatever, it's fine. But I'm not going to kowtow to those people. I'm not going to be like, I'm not going to shy away from making content that I want to make because it might piss off, a certain subset of my viewers or anything like that. I did in Breaking Bad right now. I'm always like kind of defending Skylar, not because like I think she's perfect or anything like that, but I don't. The reaction against her was so much in the opposite direction. I didn't agree with it. I was like, you guys pull it back here. Like, yeah, she's a bad person. They all are, but she doesn't deserve this like completely, to one side reaction that the internet has kind of given her.
It was it was weird. The Skylar hate was very weird.
And it was and people disagree with me on those comments there. They're like, no, fuck Skylar, fuck, whatever. And I'm like, all right, more power to you, but I'm going to give my honest view about her. Yeah, she does shitty things. She deserves to have bad things happen to her, but not nearly the amount of the actress especially does not deserve the amount of vitriolic hate that she gets. And maybe we'll talk about that in a separate video, but it's yeah, the internet is a weird place for kind of hive mind and like congregations of like really extreme opinions. And it's just a show, man. It's just just TV.
Yeah, it was like you could hate Skylar, but like the fact that it's like the anger that it sort of like instilled in a lot of guys and fans, and like as someone who was like a real big part of the fandom when it
Yeah,
was airing, um, I was even like weird. I was like, what the fuck? This is kind of weird. Um, but funny enough, in one of my previous videos, I talk about how David Chase, he did sort of resent how a lot of people, not necessarily like the meme, like obviously like Sopranos is like meme fodder. Like
yeah,
we can enjoy it as meme fodder,
yeah,
but
of
also
course.
talk about the stuff. But there were a lot of people who would watch that show, kind of like going back to you talking about the video game. They would watch the show for like, yeah, man, Tony's a badass, and it's like the anxiety ridden mob boss with mommy issues, like,
Yeah.
or he's like super, it's like the same issue with guys who like watch Mad Men and they're like, yeah man, this Don Draper guy, he's alpha, he's got it figured out. And they just kind of,
Yeah.
and like we, like most people understand like that is the irony of the show. Like, Don Draper is like this pinnacle of masculinity and he's an alpha bad boy sigma male. And as the show goes on, they just reveal that he's an insecure little boy who's just
Yeah.
horrified of the world around him. But there is a subset of the audience who just don't get that nuance, and it can be very frustrating.
Yeah, I also feel that way about the Many Saints of Newark, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole because this could be a completely separate video. But a lot of people had a very negative reaction think about the black storyline of the Many Saints of Newark and being like, "This has nothing to do with the Sopranos. What? Why are we watching this?" And I was like, if you can't understand like the black subplot that's happening throughout the Sopranos, like I don't think you really watch the show. Like it's there throughout the entire thing. It's not like super in your face about it, but the whole African American experience and how it relates to the mob is something like David Chase has been writing about this entire time with the Sopranos. They have a whole episode called Unidentified Black Males on the show, right? There's we have it's part of the fabric of the show. And yeah, you could argue that it wasn't executed well in The Many Saints. I don't think it was. But I absolutely think that that's something that David Chase has been putting in the show and been interested in talking about the entire time. And I don't think it's coming from a place of fake, forced, whatever. It's coming from a genuine interest, with artistic interest with him. Now, maybe he fumbled that movie. Maybe he didn't do it the right way. Um, but it's absolutely there. And I think that people who don't understand that, again, are just focusing on the gabagool aspect, which is, it's part of it too. I don't want to say the memes are not a part of it and you can't enjoy it for that reason. Or you can't, like, yeah, Tony Soprano is masculine in a lot of ways. And, you can't appreciate certain aspects of that, right? You can't appreciate a certain aspect of toughness and a certain aspect of, you know, alphaness. I don't want to say that like you can't appreciate any aspect of his character. It's there, but it's not the whole picture. And I think you're painting it in like a very simplistic light.
It's like saying Ted Bundy was really charismatic. Like, okay, like, yeah, he was charismatic. That's cool, but like that this isn't a thing where we like, given everything else he did, like we shouldn't like let's hand it to him. Like, no, we shouldn't. That's weird to me.
Yeah, I mean, the Ted Bundy example is like you don't want to be anything like Ted Bundy. I think there are maybe aspects of Tony Soprano that you want to be. I think there's probably aspects of Don Draper or whoever, and all the Walter White, that it's like, yeah, I could take a lesson from here, which is, in certain situations, yeah, don't back down. In certain situations, act tough, like get in someone's face. But it's not the whole picture of who they are. There's a
Hmm.
lot of toxicity there. There's a lot of negativity there. There's a lot of insecurity there. But I don't also want to write off like Tony Soprano is like, yeah, this is the there's no relatable aspect there. He's incredibly relatable, and that's why he's such an interesting character. But I know we're getting down a rabbit hole here, but
Well, well, yeah. I mean, that's like the tragedy of Tony Soprano is that at the beginning, like throughout the series, we sense there is a good person in there. There is a
yeah,
man who does care for his family, who does want to. His like the entire show, his subconscious is literally screaming at him, "Cut and run! Get out of
mhm,
this life! You're
yeah,
going to lose your family. You're going to lose everything you care about." And it's because of everything else around him, his stresses, his insecurities, it's like his own sense of masculinity that just destroy. And like that's why the final season in particular is so tragic, was that
mhm,
he had that wake up call. Hey, I'm finally out. I'm going to step away and become a better person. And then we just see the slow decline into him becoming the worst version, like an absolute monster by the end of the season, by the end of the series.
yeah. I mean, that's why it's so interesting to watch. But I know we're coming up on our hour here. We had a very interesting discussion. Any final thoughts you want to share, or any kind of comments that you want to relay to the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I know we kind of like obviously like we didn't want to stick on the Oscars too much because there
Yeah,
really isn't that much to say about it, or
yeah,
everything that has to be said has been said. But I guess like yeah, I don't really know. I'm trying to think of like I mean even like other award shows like Directors Guild, Producers Guild, whatever. Even critic reviews nowadays, like or quote unquote professional critic reviews, the ones that are like logged on Rotten Tomatoes and big publications. It's interesting that it's gotten to the point where like all that stuff just kind of doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Who won Best Picture 5 or 6 years ago? I mean, I could tell you because I'm a loser and I like memorize that shit. But like in terms of like the general public, does it actually matter if X won Best Picture? It when like people are like, oh, Raging Bull didn't win Best Picture in 1980 over Ordinary People, even though Raging Bull today is considered a stone cold one of the greatest films of all time. And it's kind of weird that people still get upset about that. I mean, like they don't really get upset, but like it's
yeah,
kind of weird to harp on it because literally nowadays, 5 years after your film gets upset at the Oscars, a perfect example: The King's Speech beat Social Network for Best Picture at the 2010 2011 Oscars. Um, King's Speech was a good movie, but which is the film that's being heralded as one of the best of the decade? And like King's Speech, oh yeah, that's a good movie.
yeah.
But Social Network is a film that really has stood the test of time.
I mean, it's also a problem with like like the internet and streaming has completely changed the landscape of how we consume media, right? It used to be like, oh, every Saturday you're going out and you're going to see the latest movie because that's all that's on, or you're going to watch whatever's on cable or whatever. But nowadays, if you want to dedicate the rest of your life to watching movies from the 1940s, you can. It's all available online. You can watch it. You can immerse yourself in that, and you can completely ignore what's going on out there. But in the past, like once the movie came out and it was gone, like you're not watching it again. Maybe you get a VHS one day from Blockbuster, but it's just there's not this whole like ecosystem to support getting into old media.
Hmm.
And so people's interests are evolving as this goes on. They're watching more obscure stuff. They're getting into real fandoms. They're getting into whatever. And so the idea of who won best overall picture is becoming more and more meaningless because I'm really into, dramas on television. That's all I'm into. I don't care about whatever's going on over here, or I'm really into this like decade of movies or what, so it doesn't matter what they think the overall best picture this year is because I'm only into my niche now. Everything's getting more and more niche.
Hmm.
And so maybe the Oscars needs to evolve and to break up into, rather than just these different categories or whatever, being into like, this is the award ceremony for this genre. This is the award ceremony for this genre. They have something like that, but maybe they need to get even more and more granular into that in order to stay relevant in a kind of post internet age.
Hmm. Well, it's funny to kind of wrap up. There's two things about the Oscars I don't think are talked about enough, and you touched on one. But one of the big things is the fact that in the past, again, because films were only in theaters and streaming wasn't really a thing, even like rentals were pretty rare for the most part. Um, if a film won Best Picture or if it got a lot of attention at the Oscars, that would mean something. It would often lead to the film being re-released in theaters, and then everyone's like, "Oh, hey, this film that I've never seen or heard of won Best Picture or Best Director. I'm going to go see it now." So winning an Oscar back then was actually like a big deal because it actually meant a lot of money. Whereas nowadays, that doesn't really happen. Most films that are nominated at the Oscars are already there's already enough buzz. And again, because of the dwindling relevance, you probably know or have heard or seen the films being up for the Oscars before the Oscar ceremony. And but then for other people who don't really care about the Oscars, hey, this movie won Best Picture, and it's like if they didn't care before the Oscars, they're probably not going to care after the Oscars. Another big thing I think is the fact that, and you touch on this, is that the implementation of streaming has really shown people just how narrow-minded the Oscars are. There are so many films that become are small independent pictures, like lesser known pictures, not these big budget tentpole films that people see via streaming, and it becomes popular. They're like, "Wow, this movie is awesome," and then come Oscar time, it's nowhere to be found, and people are like, "Why isn't this film up for Oscar?" It's like, well, it didn't make a lot at the box office, it didn't get a lot of hype at critics awards, but to the people watching film who love film, in their mind, they're like, "I don't care about that stuff. Of all the films I saw this year, this was the best film. Why isn't this nominated among the best films?" And that's kind of when the facade of just how not really even elitist, but just kind of like sometimes how out of touch the Oscars are. Like when there was that big controversy, oh, we can't nominate Netflix films. Like just like the arrogance and the just how out of touch they are even today is just still ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean it's a changing landscape, and we've seen like media companies and media franchises die for failing to keep up with changing consumer trends and changing interests. So it's a question of whether the Oscars will adapt or they'll slowly die off, and we'll see what the future holds for them. But this has been a very interesting talk. I think we covered a lot of ground here about not only the Oscars but ourselves and what it kind of means to review stuff and to judge things like that. So always enjoy these conversations. They're always a highlight of my weekend.
Me as well.
Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode of No One's a Critic coming soon.
Take care, y'all.